Last time on Australia at War, Serbian Gravillo Princip assassinates Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in Sarajevo.
A disastrous war may be averted. But should the worst happen after everything has been done that honour will permit, Australians will stand behind our own to help and defend her to the last man and the last shilling.
Australia enters the war. After 4.5 months of training near Cairo, the Australians departed by ship for the Gallipoli Peninsula with troops from New Zealand, Britain and France. The Australians landed at what became known as Anzac Cove on the 25th of April 1915. As fighting on the Western Front in France in late 1914 deteriorated into a stalemate, the British War Council suggested that Germany could best be defeated by attacks on her allies, Austria, Hungary and Turkey. A combined international force, the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force, was assembled under the command of British General Sir Ian Hamilton, and a three-pronged landing was planned to clear the Turkish defenders from the straits. At 4:30 a.m. on the 25th of April 1915, the Anzacs landed at a difficult and desolate spot on the Gallipoli Peninsula. The Anzacs made little headway over a series of rocky heights covered with thorny scrub. By the end of the day, strong Turkish counterattacks confined the British to two small pockets of land on the tip of the peninsula at Cape Helles, and the Anzacs to a strip of rugged country further up the peninsula, inland of Aribanu Point. Both sides experienced heavy casualties. By 3 a.m. on the 26th of April, more than 1,700 casualties would be evacuated. The Battle of the Landing had temporarily exhausted both sides. Moreover, the landing had failed, for neither the Anzacs nor the British force at Helles had been able to capture the southern part of the Gallipoli Peninsula. The Australians and New Zealanders were unable to advance. 19th of May 1915. At 3 a.m. on the 19th of May, the Anzac trenches were fully manned and awake all along the line in the expectation of a Turkish attack. Shortly after 3 a.m, the glinting bayonets of Turkish soldiers were observed in the clear night, moving in the valley. The Australians began firing, and by mid-morning had discharged 948,000 rifle and machine gun bullets into waves of attacking Turks all along the Anzac line. Approximately 3,000 Turks had been killed and another 7,000 wounded. The Anzacs, by comparison, lost 160 killed and 468 wounded. 24th of May 1915. Between 7:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m, a truce was arranged to allow both sides to bury their dead. August 3rd, 1915. During the nights of 3rd to 5th of August, an extra 20,000 soldiers of the British 13th Division were secretly brought ashore at Anzac for the prolonged August offensive. As part of a diversionary attack to draw Ottoman attention away from the August offensive, the Australian 1st Division were tasked with assaulting a central stronghold of the Turkish line, while a British force would land further to the north and begin pushing inland. The assault pitched Australian forces against formidable entrenched Turkish positions. The main Turkish trench was taken within 20 minutes of the initial charge, but this was the prelude to 4 days of intense hand-to-hand fighting. Finally, on the 9th of August, the Ottomans called off any further attempts, and by the 10th of August, offensive action ceased, leaving the Australians in control of the position. Despite the Australian victory, the wider August offensive, of which the attack had been a part, failed, and a situation of stalemate developed around Lone Pine, which lasted until the end of the campaign. The fighting was some of the fiercest the Australians experienced during the campaign to that point. Ottoman losses are estimated at between 5,000 and 6,000. Of the Australian force that had launched the attack, almost half became casualties. Australian losses during the battle mounted to 2,277 men killed or wounded. 7th of August 1915, the Battle of Neck. On the 7th of August 1915, 2 regiments of the Australian 3rd Light Horse Brigade mounted a tragic and futile attack on the Ottoman trenches. The Neck was a vitally important position on the northern end of the Anzac front line. The attack was scheduled to commence at 4:30 a.m. on the 7th of August. It was to be preceded by a naval bombardment. The 8th and 10th Light Horse Regiments were to advance in 3 waves. It was later discovered that the synchronization of watches between the artillery officer and the assault officer was overlooked. As a result, the attack was not launched at the scheduled time, giving the Ottoman defenders ample time to return to their trenches and prepare for the assault. The first wave of 150 men from the 8th Light Horse Regiment was met with machine gun and rifle fire, and within 30 seconds, all of the men had been killed. The second wave continued and met with the same fate. Lieutenant Colonel Noel Brazier, commander of the 10th Light Horse Regiment, attempted to have the third wave cancelled, claiming that the whole thing was nothing but bloody murder. He was unable to find Colonel Hughes, and unable to persuade the brigade major, the third wave proceeded. Of the 600 Australians who took part in the attack, there were 372 casualties.
of language that makes the sergeant blush. Who wouldn't join the army? That's what we all inquire. Don't we picture the poor civilians sitting around the fire? Oh, 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 it's a lovely war. It's a lovely war. Who wouldn't be a soldier, eh?
Oh, it's a shame to take the pain.
As soon as Rebellion is gone,
We feel just as heavy as lead.
but we never get up to the sergeant brings the breakfast up to bed. Oh, 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 it's a lovely war. What do we want? Three legs and ham when we got plum and apple jam. Oh, oh, right, son, how do we spend the money we earn? Oh, 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 it's a lovely
15th November 1915. Field Marshal Lord Kitchener, Commander-in-Chief of the British Army, recommended to the British War Cabinet that Gallipoli, Anzac, Suvla and Helles be evacuated. November 1915. Severe rain and thunderstorms which turned into blizzards hit Gallipoli. More than 280 men died, and there were 16,000 cases of frostbite and exposure. Evacuation was a dangerous task. The Australians designed drip rifles to deceive the Turkish forces during the evacuation. Rifles set up in the Anzac trenches would automatically fire as two tins, one above the rifle and one attached to the trigger, would fill with water. When the lower tin had become sufficiently heavy, the rifle would fire. On the night of the 19th and 20th December, the last Anzac and British troops were evacuated from Suvla and Anzac. The evacuation of these positions over the preceding 2 weeks had taken place virtually without casualties. What had been planned as a bold stroke to quickly knock Turkey out of the war instead resulted in 26,111 Australian casualties. Of these, 362 officers and 7,779 men were killed in action, die of wounds, or succumb to disease. While the campaign is considered a military failure, Gallipoli became a household name in Australia, and with it, the Anzac spirit was created. Endurance, courage, ingenuity, good humour, larrikinism and mateship. Gallipoli became the common tie forged in diversity that bound the colonies and people of Australia into a nation. Today, the spirit of Anzac lives on. As Arthur Burke OAM penned, "The spirit of Anzac is not confined to the battlefield. It lives in the schools, on the sports fields, in fact all over these great countries of Australia and New Zealand. The sun invades our bodies and makes us mad, mad for freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom to live and think as you will. The spirit of Anzac is not something we can see, but a powerful driving sensation that can only be felt. It is a feeling that burns in the heart of every Australian and New Zealand countryman. A warm, tender, fiery, even melancholy ideal that nurtures intense patriotism in the innermost soul of everybody. Many Foundation Anzacs died, but their glorious challenge to catch the thrown torch shouts loud and strong to all. Their goal was freedom for the land they loved. We owe to those men who fought, endured, suffered and died for us and for their country. Their deeds and their sacrifices gave us the invincible, the intangible, the spirit of Anzac.